Hello, and welcome to the Nurturing Resilience podcast, where me, your host, Leisha Nelson, weaves together the worlds of somatics, science, and energetics to nurture a deeper connection to yourself. This is a podcast that covers a span of topics and ideas, from guest storytelling their rites of passage that catalyzed their resiliency, to nervous system and mind-body health education, to deep contemplation on topics such as cultivating connection to ourselves and others in a complex world. I'm an occupational therapist, somatic practitioner, and body worker, attachment specialist, and baby whisperer, with over 20 years of experience with mind-body connection and supporting matrescence. What you're receiving today and listening today is the uncut version of my podcast. This is where I interview guests and I don't do any editing. You're getting it all in the raw. If you're interested in my podcast, you can find that on Spotify, which is the edited version. And if you're interested in my work, you can follow me on Instagram at Leisha Nilsson and also through my website at leishanilsson.com. If you enjoy what you hear today, if you enjoy this podcast, please share it on your social media pages with your friends, your family, your loved ones. Let the world know that it's here. If you really like it, you can follow me and write a review. That's how my podcast gets out to listeners like you. And this important information about the body, somatics, and nervous system can find more people that need it. All right, thanks so much, and let's dive in. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about this taboo topic of choosing to not be a mom.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm a little bit nervous actually, because this is the first time, apart from an Instagram post, this is the first time that I'm really speaking about it. And I'm also really grateful actually, because I think it'll be healing for myself and maybe also for some people listening.
Yeah. So I love actually tell our audience, and maybe I'll include your Instagram post below, but you kind of were on a little Instagram hiatus, almost a little bit, like you had stepped away and got married and went on a honeymoon, and you came back and did this post and it blew up. Do you want to just share what this post was, and then I can talk about how I know you too?
So yeah, now I'm Insta famous. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so basically I'd been off social media for about a month, and then I was on honeymoon, and I just wrote out this post of, I'm 34. Well, I was 34 then, but I'm 35 now. Newly married, and shock horror, I don't want a baby. And I just wrote it like a carousel post and posted it mainly as a way to just kind of own what I was feeling and thinking. It was more like I just want to say it. And yeah, it blew up. And what I really loved about how it kind of blew up was that there were it was like over 100 comments from people I knew, people I didn't know, all just sharing their story. And it was all very much, all the comments were really supportive of my choice, sharing their experiences, sharing the taboo things of like, yeah, I have kids, but it was the hardest thing, or like, I should never have had kids, or I've had kids, or I haven't had kids, and it was the best decision I ever made. And it just felt like this, I was just reading through all the comments, and it just felt really like affirming to me. And also, I had a conversation with a few friends who had seen it, and they said that they'd read all the comments as well, and it was really helpful for them. So yeah, I've pinned it on the top of my profile if anyone wants to check it. But yeah, I just found it like it was like a really beautiful communal experience. And I think that's what can happen when we talk about taboo subjects on the internet sometimes.
Yeah, because this whole taboo thing, what I've been exploring with people in this little mini series, is that taboo literally meaning like don't talk about it. And some of it mean don't talk about it because it's sacred, or only certain people can talk about it, only elite people can talk about it. And what I'm really trying to bring to light is that when we do talk about these taboo topics, it can create a beautiful communal experience. I love how you said that.
I definitely felt it. This went on for a few days and I was getting my husband involved as well. I was like, look at these comments. And, we were on our honeymoon as well. It was really, it felt very timely. Yeah. So I love that definition of taboo. And yeah, that was definitely how I felt it.
Yeah. So this is such a big topic, and I've kind of introduced it as like, oh, it's this fun Instagram post that blew up. So I want to name that this is really a really big topic for a lot of women, and it does encompass so many things. It encompasses the choice of a woman today not to have children, I have kids and I wish I wouldn't have, which I just want to say that's normal and named, and I hear that also. I have kids and I fucking love it, and it's really, really hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And also to name, there's this whole other group of women that want children and can't have children, and how devastating that is. So there's actually so much complexity in this conversation. And by no means, by having this conversation of two women who have made the choice not to have children, are we saying that those other experiences are bad or not good? Like, I want to name that everyone's coming from a completely different walk of life and a completely different perspective. And no matter what you choose to do, it's all okay. It all gets to be here as part of, I'm going to say, a modern day woman who now has the choice to decide, because we didn't used to.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. And that was something that, I tried to kind of put across in the post that I wrote. But of course, there's only so many characters that you have. And yeah, it's really nuanced, it's really complex. And I think everybody's perspective on this matters and is important and is valid. And so I'm so happy that you're naming that.
Yeah. So my hope in having this conversation is like, this conversation is more for the women questioning having children. And that's a really big question.
Yeah. And I can even feel a little bit of like this bubbling in my solar plexus as we're talking. And as we're about to like embark on this conversation, because I'm not a woman who is usually afraid to speak her truth, but on this one, it's edgy for me to be here speaking about this, because it's actually really vulnerable. And I think our choice, if we have a choice to have or not have kids, it really speaks to so many things. It speaks to who we are as people. It speaks to our priorities. It speaks to social conditioning, social expectations. And so, like, I'm revealing so much about myself in this conversation. And yeah, I just want to name that. It feels really edgy. And there's part of me that's like, oh, this might not be a good idea, So I'm just naming it.
Oh, well, thanks for being pushed to your edge. And I feel it too, because I think part of my intention is to share my story and my decision a little bit too, because I get asked that a lot. And it does feel edgy. And I was reflecting before this podcast about how I met you, which I met you through working with Rachel Maddox and her coven. And I had Alyssa on a couple weeks ago, who was also part of that coven. So there were 4 of us working with her. And I feel like for me, a lot of working with her was really working through owning the fact that I want to work with pregnancy and postpartum and newborns, while also naming that I don't have children. That is something really big. And that was a choice. It's not because I couldn't have children, like biologically and physically, I totally could. and still can. I haven't gone through menopause yet. And so I really had to work through holding that energy in a very clean way. And that was a lot of my work with her, was I can do both, and I can be a baby whisperer without being a mother first. And I'm inundated with, and and there's some truth to this of like, well, until you've experienced it, you can't actually be in it, or you can't help with it. And so I've had to sit with that a lot. But to say this, that a lot of the work I feel like all of us did in this coven was speaking our edges, like coming out and being like, this is me, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, or if you disagree with it, I'm still okay.
I'm so sorry. I just need to, otherwise the dog's going to bark forever. 2 seconds.
You're all
so
good.
sorry.
You're totally good. No, don't be sorry. Yeah, so I think I'll have you start, because let me rewind a tiny bit. So for a lot of us, it was us coming out of the closet and saying, this is who we are. And it's okay if you don't necessarily like what I have to say, or if you don't like me, really stepping into more security. So I love that I have you and Alyssa on this series about taboo topics, because it's almost like the integration of us coming out of the closet and being like, yeah, we're going to talk about some edgy things.
I'm so grateful for you and Alyssa. Like that was, and Rachel and Jenna, it was such an amazing experience. And yeah, like it really built my confidence to be able to go there. And yeah, that's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. So we still stay in touch, and you and I were talking, and your post about not having children had blown up. And I said in that conversation with you, hey, do you want to come on my podcast and talk about this? And you agreed.
Yeah, I agreed. I was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I would just love to hear a little bit of your story around this, maybe what led you to writing those things and deciding to post it. And just, it's such a complex journey to make this decision. And I would just love to hear a little bit of your story around it.
Yeah. So I guess where I will begin is I always assumed that I would have kids. Like in, Sarah's imaginary future, I always saw myself having a family, but I've never really felt that. I've never felt it like in terms of like felt sense. It's more like a concept, but not really like an embodied, yearning. And I have friends who have always known that they've wanted to be mothers. They are like baby obsessed, and it's just what they want. And I think I've been so I met my husband in 2017, and he's just the best guy ever. And if there is one man that I would have kids with, it's him. Like, he's just incredible. He'd be an incredible father. I love him so much. We recently got married. And I just always assumed that the time would come when I would be like, oh, that biological instinct or whatever it is would kick in. And I hit 32, hadn't happened. Well, maybe it's just because I'm focusing on my career. Hit 33, still hadn't happened. And then the whole year of being 34, which was the year that I got married, me and my husband were just going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. Do we want kids? Yeah, I think we want them. Oh no, I'm not sure actually. And it was just like, it was absolutely exhausting. And then there just came a moment when I realized I don't want them. I don't feel this. I don't feel like I want children. And it felt like such a relief to me to just finally come out with it and say, you know what, I don't think I'm meant to be a mother in that sense. And I felt like I was saying something that was really true, because anytime I'd be like, yeah, we might think about having kids in the next couple of years, I felt like I was lying. I felt like I was playing a part. And by actually turning around to my husband and saying, I don't want kids, and he was like, yeah, I don't think I do either, and just us really finding a relief in that decision. And since we've made that decision and we're sticking to that decision, it feels like everything has opened up. I feel lighter, I feel more authentic. And there's so many reasons as to why I feel like I don't want kids that we can like go into, but the main one is I don't feel it. And that's actually the hardest to tell people, like I just don't feel it, because then people, like a lot of people, try and convince you that, oh well, you're never going to feel ready. And I'm like, but I just don't feel it. I really don't feel it. My body is just like a full on like, nah. So yeah, that's kind of, I mean, that's in a nutshell as to how like I've come to the decision and how we have come to the decision, because we're a unit. And yeah.
I love so much about that. I mean, a lot of your work is a nervous system and embodiment coach. And, it's so interesting because you and I both are part of feminine embodiment worlds. And so I think there's almost this cliche or assumption that if you're in the feminine embodiment world, that means you have this desire or motherly, like to be a mom, because that's part of quote unquote the feminine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I relate to that so much of I've never felt that like desire. There was a brief time that I did, but it wasn't like how people talk about. And I knew that if I ever did try, and if it didn't happen for me, that I wouldn't go down the whole route of like IUI or IVF. Like I just didn't have, like you said, that felt sense. And there's so much conditioning on women around, well, this is what you're supposed to do. Like you're supposed to do this. And so it brings up this whole complex subject of like, well, are we less of a woman because we are having children?
Yes.
We're not doing our duty.
Well, we're not doing our duty. No, we're not bringing more workers into the workforce. Well, that's another topic. But yeah, I've definitely felt this. And it's interesting because on one hand, like whenever I see people on Instagram and they're like, yay, I'm pregnant and stuff, unless it's like someone I really know really well, usually there's like indifference. I couldn't care less. And also there's this deep sense of like, oh, I do not want to go through that. Like I have this real aversion to this idea of growing a human inside me. Like that's my body sense. But then there's the conceptual part, like the idea of it was, oh, wouldn't that be nice? And yeah, like I have had this fear of missing out. There is definitely still a fear of missing out. And I'm curious as to if you still feel that, like all these years later, but there is a fear of not necessarily missing out on like the family. I have a really good community here. I don't feel like I'm missing anything, but I think the fear for me is like missing out on like that experience of what it's like to actually grow a life and give birth. But I think that's the like how it's been romanticized. I think there's like a very romantic idea of what it is to be a mother, and this idea of like, oh, welcome to womanhood, or like some bullshit like that. And there's still part of me that's like feels a little bit hooked into that. And so it's like a real process now of unhooking from those narratives. And then also something that I really want to speak to is that I'm still grieving my decision, and I don't think that's spoken about enough. Like I feel, I can feel it in my throat right now. There's like, yeah, I'm still grieving because it's a loss. Like deciding not to become a mom, even though you know that it's the right decision, and it's like just the relief is also coupled with I'm losing a child that on some level I thought I would have. And that's a very weird thing to explain to people and to navigate because, you know, shut up, Sarah, you don't get to grieve something you never had, but that's how it feels. So it still feels like a very vulnerable, it still feels like a really vulnerable place. And I know that it's the right decision.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much there. I think I'll start with one of the first pieces you said of, I'll start with the grief because that's what you named most recently. And yes, absolutely. Like I definitely went through that and had to go through that. And I think it happens less now. It's really interesting. It used to really happen for me in the springtime.
Really? That's so curious.
Just being a cyclical creature, and we have a lot of snow where I live, and we have some dark winters, and there would always be this kind of life force energy that as the snow would start to melt and I'd start to spend more time outside with nature, that's when the grief would hit, or this realization of I'm not having a child. And it happened more at like 38, 39, 40. And I think now that I'm 42, I'm in this space of no judgment for anyone that's 42, 43, 44 wants to have a child. My sister had a baby at 42, very healthy pregnancy and delivery and birth. But I just know that like my body is just not in the space necessarily. Like to introduce a baby into my body at this point of my life is like not really something I want to push my body through at this point. It would be a physical push for my body at this point. I just know that compared to how I felt at 26 or whatever, 32 even. So there's definitely grief. And I think for me, there's the grief of kind of what you named before is I'm not going to have that experience. And that experience is definitely romanticized. It's romanticized on Instagram a lot of, you know, I would like to have that total, I work so much with the nervous system and letting go and surrender. And there is a part of me that's like, oh, the ultimate surrender is giving birth physically. And I'm not going to have that experience. And so I grieve that of like, I'm missing out on that experience. the ultimate surrender experience. And then what I'm inundated with on Instagram is that therefore I will never be quote unquote a mother.
Yeah.
I will never be which I actually think is untrue in a way. Yes, I won't be a mother. Yes, I won't be pushed to that physical point, but it doesn't mean that I don't have the nurturing aspects or the archetype of the mother.
Mm.
And I think that's something that's really missing in conversation with women and really missing in general, is because it is romanticized, there is a part of me that believes I'm less than.
Yeah.
Like there is a part of me, like in all these different fragment parts of ourselves, that I'm less than because I'm not producing life. Like that's the conditioning.
Yeah.
That
I so resonate with this.
And I think a lot of women choosing not to have a child just might not choose to sit with it as much as I have. Or you have, maybe, like maybe they do. Like I've had to process this so much.
Yeah.
And so there is that part of me that's like, in society's eyes, I'm less than.
Mm-mm.
And so there's grief with that.
Yeah. I really, really resonate with that. And well, thank you for sharing all of that, because it's actually really helpful for me to hear this from you as well, as a fellow person who's decided not to have kids. And something that me and my husband have spoken about a lot is this fear of being selfish. Like, is it that we're selfish? Is it that we just don't have the capacity that other people have? Like feeling like maybe it's a capacity thing, and so it's a failing on our part that, we see people that we know who have kids and they're running around like headless chickens, and we're like, oh God, I do not want to do that. So, but then there's the guilt of like, well, I should be doing that, and that's what I'm supposed to do to ensure the survival of the species. Although, at this point in time, I don't think we need to really worry about how many, the number, the population or anything like that, the number of people on the planet. So yeah, it's very subtle, and it really speaks to the conditioning of what it is to be a woman, of being selfless. And I am being selfish by saying I don't want a kid. I am being very selfish. I'm saying that actually my needs are more important than an unborn child's needs, a child that doesn't even exist yet. I'm saying that I love my life as it is. I'm saying that I love the spaciousness and the time and the money to focus on my own evolution, focus on my craft, focus on what I want to be doing. And then there is this part of me that wonders as well whether the reason that I don't necessarily want to be a mom in the traditional sense is because that role is being fulfilled in other places in my life. So I very much am a dog mom. Like, you cannot tell me otherwise. Like, I'm such a dog mom. And also, I'm a nurturer and take care of a lot of people. I'm the one in my friendship group that people come to when they need advice and support and, non-judgmental witnessing. My client work as well is very, very fulfilling. I feel like I'm making a difference. So there isn't this like huge hole in my life. So I feel like those needs get filled. And that's potentially one of the reasons why I don't need to have a child in order to have a sense of purpose, a sense of contribution, a sense of like being needed. So yeah, it's but at the same time, there's something else that comes up as I'm speaking actually is that one of the fears that I have is particularly around some of my friends with children and some of my clients with children. Like I really fear the judgment of them, of like, well, it's easy for you, almost like my life isn't hard enough, so like um I can't even complain. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's almost like you can't complain about anything because like I have it way worse. I've got like 5 kids or whatever. And, of course you can swan off to the beach on your day off or whatever. And so there's a feeling of guilt there, of like guilt, and then feeling, being worried that I'm going to be like not part of the group, or there's a lot still that I have to unpack, and it feels really good to just kind of share it because maybe there are some people listening that also feel the same way. And I'm curious about how you feel as well, Leisha, if that's, particularly because of your line of work, like how has that shown up for you in the line of work that you're doing as someone who hasn't had a baby?
Yeah, I feel like I feel that too. I even feel that with my sister who lives in the same city as me. I'll be like, well, I'll be giving her some self-care recommendation tips or talking about stuff. And she's like, I can't because I have children. Like, I just can't. And she doesn't project onto me like your life is so much easier. She very much chose to have children. She very much wanted to become a mother, and watching both my sisters become mothers has been really, really healing for me personally. So I feel like there's a little bit of like, I won't take advice from you because you don't have children attitude online.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, you named it.
And I also like, yes, I don't have children. I don't know how crazy it is. And again, it's perspective, right? And it's to say, like, I almost compare that to when someone says, well, my trauma is worse than yours. And
oh yeah,
no one's trauma is worse than someone else's. It's what's going on inside the nervous system of the body and how your body's interpreting the trauma. One person can get in a car accident and be fine, and another person get in a car accident and it's massive trauma. It's like, what's going on from the inside perspective in the nervous system. And I see that with people with kids. I have a friend that's like, having a child, she makes it look easy, and she's such a good mom. She has a lot of support. She lives in a beautiful place in the world, like she gets to be a stay-at-home mom. She got to have a night nurse when she was with her newborn. Like, she makes motherhood look easy. She has a lot of support to have it look easy, but it's like, it's just so, it is frustrating for me sometimes though, to hear that, well, you don't know because you don't have kids. You don't know because like your life is so much better. And it's something I've sat with in the very beginning when I first started doing craniosacral on pregnancy. This was, God, I don't even know, in like maybe 2014 or 15 when I was studying this. And I was studying really closely. It was a small, intimate group, and I was studying really closely with this mentor specific to craniosacral therapy, newborns, and pregnancy. And we were having women come that were pregnant or had newborns, and there was a small group of us working on them with our mentor teaching us. And one of the conversations I said with her, one of the things we talked a lot about was, I don't have the lived experience of being pregnant or being a mother. So how can I work with these mothers? And she said to me, well, Alicia, you're an occupational therapist, right? That's your background. That's where you study. And you work with people with spinal cord injury, and you work with people with stroke, and you work with people with head injury. You've never experienced that. Do you consider yourself a great clinician? And do you consider yourself the ability to connect with them? And I was like, well, yeah, absolutely. And she's like, pregnancy is no different, like, no, it's not a lived experience, but can you hold that energy, just like any nervous system or trauma work of like, I'm with you in this. I'm your witness. I'm your companion. I'm here with you. We don't necessarily have to experience things in order to create a healing environment.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself that all the fucking time.
I bet. And I have a few clients as well who are childbirth educators or doulas, and they don't have kids, and it's the same thing. And that's so curious because it's so true. Like, if you're a brain surgeon, you don't have to have had a brain injury to be able to, do really fantastic brain surgery. Well, that's so curious. And I think it really speaks to the conditioning and almost like the shame to not have gone through it. And as we're speaking, like, that's what I can feel popping up in my system. Oh, this is shame. Something you brought up that I think is also really, really, really key is the idea of like support, and how I think since second wave feminism, women have way more opportunities, but they also have way more on their shoulders in general. And not every woman has the support they need. And one of the reasons why I know that I don't want a child, it's not just like, well, maybe it's my body's response to the environment that I'm living in, which is I don't have the support. I live in a rural community in Portugal, literally the back arse of nowhere. We don't have very good hospitals unless you go like private, and even then, dubious. I have to go up 3.5 hours up to Lisbon for my gynecological appointments. I don't have any family around me. Most of my friends don't have kids as well. And public transport is like, forget it. Like, it's not easy to live here if you have a child. Of course, there are people who have kids here that make it work, but I don't have the support here. We don't have any of that. And so I think that felt sense no is just a very valid response to my reality, which is, and then also thinking about my husband, like if I stop working, then that puts so much financial pressure on him as well. And he's a massage therapist, osteopath. So he works with his hands. There's only so much that he can actually physically do. And of course, there's a market rate here, so we can't raise his rates astronomically. So there'll be so much financial burden on him as well. And then, what if I didn't want to go back to work? These are very, very real circumstances, environmental factors that our bodies are responding to. And I don't want to live anywhere else at the moment. I like where I live. I like my lifestyle. So why, in the eyes of society, is that not a legitimate response? And also, there are plenty of women in the world that are having babies because they think they have to and don't have the support, and then find out just how hard it is. And like, yeah, if that's you listening to this, like I just witnessing you, like, you're amazing. And yeah, the system is rigged against us. And I think that it's really like this idea of having it all, like when I grew up, when I was a teenager, my schooling, it was like, the world is your oyster. You can have it all. You can have it all. The career, the home, the family, the vacations, you can have it all. And it doesn't feel true. It does not feel like I can have it all. And I think that's what's, some of the conversations I've had with the mothers who turned around and said, yeah, I love motherhood, but there's been massive trade-offs and it's been hard. I've had to sacrifice a lot of, what I used to love about my old life. And yeah, that's something that clearly I'm not willing to do. And maybe it's okay. We get to own that.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's part of that conditioning of it is a massive trade-off. Thank you for naming that. What mothers go through and the lack of support. And I mean, I've watched so many, just name my sister again, like she didn't have good sleep for 8 years. And I see so many women's bodies just falling apart because of lack of sleep and lack of nutrients and lack of family and lack of community. And the system is so rigged away from us creating a village and supporting
Yes.
mothers.
Yes. Yeah.
It feels almost intentional of like, well, if we don't support the mothers, then the babies can't be thriving and then they become dependent on the system, which is a whole nother conversation. But
I definitely think there's something in that. But yeah, this idea of village, I live in an amazing community here, but it's still not the village that could raise a child, because it's so far removed from what I know that I've lived. And yeah, I mean, there's just so many expectations put on women. Like, yeah, have your career, but, be a great mom and be attentive and be attuned all the time and, do it all yourself and
make sure you're breastfeeding, even though you have to go back to work full time.
oh,
And if you're not breastfeeding, you're a bad mom. And like, it's just, yeah, there's so much conditioning placed on the mother. And I agree with you. It's then there's conditioning placed on people like us where we're like, but I actually don't want that.
yeah.
I feel really lit up by my work, or I feel really lit up by my African dance classes, or I feel really lit up by being a dog mom. That I see that and I'm like, no, like that's a no for me. And maybe if we did have the village and the support and I'm like you, I need to bring in a certain amount of financial income in order to maintain my mortgage.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I always said to my husband when we were on this journey was, I'm not having children so that I can put them in daycare. And that is by no means a judgment to the women out there who have. That's not what I wanted. I knew that if I had a child, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And that wasn't really possible for what was happening in my life at the time with my partner.
Yeah. I thank you for saying that, and I wonder as well if I would be thinking differently, if I felt like I had the support or feeling differently. It's not really a rational thought. It's really a feeling of like, no. And I wonder if it's just like, this is a natural intelligence in action, which is like, no, these are not the right conditions. And then I also have been contemplating about like the bigger global conditions. We've just come out of a pandemic. There are wars going on everywhere, recession, cost of living crisis, and then the climate crisis. And like the thought of, and this is just for me, but the thought of like not knowing what the future holds in terms of our planet and feeling quite scared about it, if I'm being really honest, and also hopeful at the same time. There are lots of different parts of me like, yeah, we're going to turn this around and the new earth is coming. And then there's other part of me that's like, we're totally fucked and the species is going to die. And, and everything in between. So,
the same.
Yeah, so, well, that's good. That's good to know that I'm not the only one. Yeah, it feels very scary to even contemplate bringing a child into this world. And what I will say is that a lot of the people in my lives who have had kids recently, they perhaps they're not as aware of the social and global issues as I am. Like, I read a lot, I think a lot, like I'm an overthinker. And I mean, that's a survival strategy in and of itself, to try and figure out what the hell is going on, like, globally. But yeah, I kind of get the sense that they're maybe less attuned to what's going on, or it doesn't matter what's going on, like having a baby was always part of their plan. But then there are some of us, like, well, many of us here who've decided not to have kids, and we're all saying the same thing. Like, I would be frightened for my child. And yeah, it's a really tricky, nuanced topic, you know, really nuanced, because everyone's got a different opinion about it. But yeah, there's this wider, it doesn't really feel, I guess really, like, on the macro and the micro, it doesn't feel safe and supportive for me to have a child. And I'm sure there are so many women feeling this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because doing my work with pregnancy and supporting fertility and supporting women that want to have babies, I definitely have had to sit with the, like, isn't that a direct contraindication to the climate crisis?
Yeah.
Or like the world potentially ending, because like you, I have those thoughts of, people that follow the news, not to be a downer here. The climate crisis really is a thing, and we really don't have that much time if you do look at the climate statistics. And it's
fairly frightening, really.
It really is.
Really frightening. And actually, in 50 years' time, the beaches near where I live won't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I was, oh my God, like, what is even my home gonna look like in 50 years? Like, that's terrifying for me.
I think it's gonna look really, really different. And so I do sit with that, like, well, why am I bringing life here then? And there's definitely some esoteric reasons that I do believe of why life does need to continue to come here, that I don't share too often. But I also think, well, if the world is ending, we should all be doing what we love.
Yeah.
If we have 10 years to live, we should be fucking living. And if part of that experience for you of choosing life, of living, is to become a mother, then by all means, do it. But if it means not being a mother, if living your life, if you have, I mean, any of us could die tomorrow, and definitely in this death portal since having a friend pass recently. It's just, if you were to die tomorrow, would you be okay with what how and what and who and you were and how you were living your life? And if part of that is having a kid, great. If part of that is not having a kid, great. Like, the world needs happy people right now.
Yeah, I love that. And as you bring that up, it's just like, it just feels like a massive confirmation. Like, there is nothing missing from my life. And that's such a privileged place to be in. You know, I want to honor that as well, like, and witness and name that. But yeah, it's, nothing is missing. And I think something as well that has influenced my decision, or our decision, because it's not just my decision, it's my husband's decision as well, is our relationship and how important that is to us. And we noticed, like, even like, okay, this is coming up to 4 years ago now, when we got the dog. When we got our dog Manny, we noticed that the way we were interacting with each other shifted a little bit, because suddenly there was this, like, bundle of fluffy joy that wanted to get in the middle of everything. And we were so quick to take our attention away from each other and onto him because he's like ridiculously cute. So then we were like, wow, like that must be completely magnified when you have a child. And I'm under no illusion that my husband would be the center of my attention. Good God, no. Like I already know what I'm like with a dog. So we love our relationship as it is. And of course it's going to change and evolve and we may end up hating each other. Who knows? But you never know. But yeah, there's this real, what we desire for our relationship is like real intimacy, real depth, real like being together. And I think that would be greatly challenged by having a child. I'm not saying that that would be impossible. And there are people that have like amazing relationships and kids. But many people I speak to who have had children say that their relationships have changed a lot. And so we didn't want to take that risk. That was just a decision that we made for us. Like we spent a whole lifetime trying to find each other, and now we found each other. We don't want to take that risk. There may be other factors that influence our relationship, but yeah, that was something that really came through in our conversations with each other, which I just wanted to name.
Thanks for naming that. As you were talking about that, it's actually one of the pieces of grief of mine, going back to like, what are you grieving, that I did have to move through, was that my husband is like a giant kid. He's just really fun and playful, and kids love him.
Oh my God, it's the same with my husband. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah, same.
Kids just flock to him, and there's this really fun age. It's from like 4 through 9-ish. He just is so attuned to kids in those age ranges, and they have so much fun. And I love watching him with my nieces. And that was the piece I had to grieve, was that he wouldn't get that experience with his own child.
Yeah.
And then yeah. And then it goes to all the work I'm doing of being responsible for other people's emotions and feelings, because this was his choice too,
And I was double checking with Mauro to be like, are you sure? I'm not taking something from you. Are you sure? And he's like, shut up, woman. Like, I know my own mind. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it.
If it's okay, I think I'll share just a tiny bit of our decision and how my partner and I
love to hear that
came to that space, because it was years in the making. So when we first started dating and we met, for Utah standards, we met at an older age because I was previously married and he had not been. And when we were dating, we had the baby conversation of, do you want children? And at that point, I was very much a no. I had just come out of a really intense, emotionally abusive marriage. I was very much in my independence, doing a lot of healing work, and I was a no. And he was like, wait, what? And I said, yeah, like having a child is a choice and you get to decide what you want. And his mind was blown, because he'd never sat with the concept that it's a literal choice. And he was in the conditioning of, well, you just have children and this is just what you do. So for the first time in his life, he sat down and thought about, if this is my choice, am I a yes? And he wasn't a yes.
Wow.
Yeah. He just was going along with the mainstream and the current, and no one had ever asked him that question. So, I mean, I think that was so interesting. And like you, at that time, my body was a no. I never had the maternal drive. I never had the maternal instinct. I had a lot of mother abandonment issues to work through. And I hadn't worked through those at the time I had met him. And I was very much a like, no. And we stayed no for a really long time. And then when I got to be about 37, I got to this place of like, if I don't at least try, will I regret it? And I heard a yes. So I heard this yes of like, don't actively try, but don't prevent, because if you turn 40 and you never know that you maybe a spirit baby wants to come through.
Yeah.
And you just got to give it over more to the bigger picture, the universe. And this was the time that Zika virus was a really big deal. I don't know if you remember Zika virus.
Yeah.
And we were traveling to places where Zika virus was a thing.
Oh.
And so we had the decision of like, okay, after this trip, and you need to give it 6 months, let's not prevent, let's not try, let's hand it over to the bigger picture of the universe.
Yeah.
And I had always felt like a little spirit baby on my side. The last, like, this was when I was 37, I think, when Zika virus was still kind of a thing around that time. And about for about 2 years, I had a little spirit baby just hanging out with me in my fields, having conversations. And I kept being like, nope, I see you, but I'm a no. I see you, but I'm a no. And finally, one day I said to her, I call it to her, okay, fine, I'm on board, but you have to go talk to your father, because your potential father, because he's not on board. And then I swear to God, like 2 weeks later, he comes to me and he's like, what would happen if we had a baby? I was like, curious. Okay, let's do this trip to Nicaragua. Let's just give it 6 months and then let's just see what happens. And we went to our trip to Nicaragua and we came home and my husband lost his job. And it was very much this, we were both very financially dependent on his job. And my husband's identity and life was very much wrapped up in his job. And we call it set free at this point. He was set free, and it sent us both through a massive transformation and tailspin, both of us. And it took, I was in 2018, the beginning of 2018, and it took until 2021 to come out of that tailspin. And, during that, and like our marriage almost ended during that time. Like we went from like, life is great and we're going to have a baby, or we're going to try, and to like, I think we're getting divorced now. And it was very much I'm not bringing a baby into our relationship as it is like this. And we came out of that, and I still want him to come talk on a podcast and share, but we made it. We're like the statistic that doesn't make it. But at that time I was 41. Like that was my time period from 38 to 41. And there had to be some grief. There had to be that conscious choice of like, I'm not bringing a baby into this environment. Some people might have babies in order to heal their marriage, and I was not about to put that on my child. And I really had to move. I just had to like move through that. And he was very much on board either. He was like, there's no way we can have a baby. Like our marriage is barely hanging on. He was going through a huge, I'll call it spiritual awakening. He really was going through a midlife crisis. And so there was a point in time, I think I was about 41 or maybe even 40 when I was really questioning our marriage, when I was 40. And I just kind of told little spirit baby, like, not this lifetime. And more on an esoteric realm, I believe, we have different contracts with different people. And if you believe in reincarnation, like maybe you're reincarnated with different people again and again. And I just said to this being, like, it's not this lifetime. Our contracts, whatever our contracts are not going to happen this lifetime. Like they can happen in another lifetime or they can happen on another planet, whatever, because I still haven't figured that out. And she went away. Like I literally had a little spirit baby in my realm, and she left. Like she was like, okay, I hear you. I'm not coming through you. Like maybe she's going to come through someone else, he, she, but it was very clear of like, this is not happening. And then I really had to be like, but I'm a baby whisperer. I know I need to work with babies. I know I need to support mothers. I know that that's my genius and that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And had to work through again those pieces of like, I can support mothers without being a mother. Like that was like this last year really of this transition. So, and again, I don't know if I was ever a full fuck yes. There was just a really brief period where I was like, maybe I don't want to decide, so I'm going to throw it out to the universe.
Yeah.
And the universe was like, nope.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me share that. That's really the first time I've like really said the full story of the process, because I feel like I'm finally on the other side of it.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that. Not just because I get to know a bit more about you, but also because there's a lot I can resonate with there as well. The leaving it up to the universe. Yep, we've had that thought. The spirit baby. Yeah, we went to a family constellation session last year, and the spirit of a young girl came through, and the family constellation facilitator said, you have a daughter that wants to come through if you choose. And of course I cried my eyes out. Yeah, there's just a lot that really resonates. And it sounds like, you know what, so much of it is about like timing as well, and like right timing. And I guess like something my mother always says to me is like, we grow up thinking that having a child is like a God-given right, but it's not. Like, she's like, but it's not. They are, they're gifts, and nobody has a right to be a mother. And yeah, that really speaks to me. It's not a God-given right. And my mom's a funny one as well, because she's a great mom. Like I love her to pieces. I mean, of course, we've had our issues, but she's like, oh God, I never liked anyone else's kids but my own. Like, so I wonder if I'm a bit of a chip off the old block as well. Like, because like I find kids are really cute, but I remember us being in a restaurant in a cafe a few months ago, and there were like kids, and then there were dogs. And Mara was like looking at the kids, and I hadn't even registered the kids. I was just wanting to play with the dogs. So I think that really speaks to where I'm at. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Leisha, because it's really powerful. And I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with what you're speaking to.
Yeah, I'm hoping little aspects. I mean, I'm hoping people that are in this question or have already made the decision, or I mean, maybe even people that want to, that aren't able to get pregnant, something that can resonate here. And I mean, I agree, like children are gifts.
Mhm.
And it's something to be taken very seriously in this day and age, at least for me. It needs to be taken
Yeah.
seriously, and maybe it's some of the conscious conception work that I do, but it's like,
Yeah.
if yeah, I just hope that like anyone that's choosing to have a child or making that choice is really doing it consciously, recognizing the soul that they're bringing in.
Yeah.
We're imprinting our patterns and our generational traumas and our ancestry like right into that soul. And so please, God, let's let them come in very energetically and
Yeah.
cleanly so the planet can start to maybe make some shifts and some changes.
Yeah. I love that you spoke to that. And I guess that's the real kicker as well, is like, not to blow my own trumpet, but I'm fairly conscious. So I reckon that I would do a half decent job of being an actual mother, like not perfect. And for sure, like everyone fucks up their kids in some way. That I probably fuck up my kids by being too crunchy. But, you know, I mean, I think I would do a fairly decent job. I think my husband, Mara, would do a fairly decent job too. And so, yeah, there's like also grief of that, of like, oh man, like we'd actually be able to give a decent home and fairly conscious upbringing. And, we've done a lot of trauma resolution and we're near like, clean channels or anything like that. Like we've still got our shit, but yeah. And yeah, it's maybe that is a travesty as well. Like, but I have, at the end of the day, all of my decisions are based on what is my body telling me? Like, what is that felt sense? And I'm so attuned to my felt sense, yes, and my felt sense, no. And doesn't matter how much I rationalize it or try and understand logically, my body says no.
Yeah.
So it's a no.
Yeah. Thank you. I think for naming that of what is your body saying, really feeling into the felt sense of yes and no, and being honest with yourself. And I feel like this conversation has really highlighted how hard it is to be honest with yourself as a woman in this day and age because of the romantic idea and the whole mother initiation and the conditioning of this is what women do. And it's okay if it's a no, and it's okay if it's a yes. Like,
Yeah,
and
that's it.
every body is going to feel differently. And so getting really, really clear on what your body is telling you is just so, so, so important.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And for those that are listening that maybe don't have that choice, as well, like just honoring yourself in that process.
Mm.
I realize as we're speaking, I realize that it's a privilege to even think I have a choice. I don't actually know if I have a choice. Like I just assume I have a choice because I've never tried to get pregnant or anything like that. But yeah, just recognizing that I think what I want to say is like, whatever your truth is around this, whatever your truth is, when, and the circumstances you find yourself in and the decisions that you're making, like it's all valid. And rather than like judging ourselves or judging mothers or judging non-mothers, like something that really I saw in that post that I wrote with the comments, because the post that I wrote wasn't particularly eloquent, but the comments, I really see how perhaps our fears are not so founded in anything anymore. And at least in my circles, women are just wanting to support each other.
Mm. Mm.
Or at least that's my hope.
Yeah, I think that too. I have chills with that of whatever decision people are making. We really are, at least in my circles as well, we're moving towards what can I do to support you, whether no matter what choices to have a baby or not have a baby? Like, how do we support that?
Yeah. And one of my best friends is in the process of, she wants a baby and now she's trying to get pregnant. And I am so excited to be an active aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the capacity to do that now. I can really help her. I mean, she's in the UK, but I can fly over, I can stay for extended periods of time. And I want to play an active role in that process, because I know she's going to need support. So that was another thing that I spoke to in the post about being like an aunt of the world. And I think this was something, I think I read this originally, I don't know if it was Glennon Doyle or Elizabeth Gilbert. There was someone who spoke to that, and it's a concept that really resonates with me. Like almost like being the supporting act. That's kind of like, sometimes the supporting acts are like cooler than the main characters. And I'm like, yeah, that fits, the shoe fits there, you know, like and that feels really nice to kind of see myself as the embodiment of the aunts of the world, you know, of having the resources and the time to support others as they are rearing their children or looking after their animals, or, you know, I'm all about ecosystems as well, so like I'm wanting to contribute there. And yeah, maybe that's also where that mothering energy gets channeled into the role of aunt. And I think that it's a bit of a misconception that all women in society have, you know, everyone has been a mother in the past, and, you know, apart from those who weren't able to have kids, but there have been women throughout the centuries that have chosen not to have kids, and they played a vital role in society. So yeah, maybe that percentage is increasing, but that percentage has always been there. And I think that's something to also speak to as well, that childless women play a very important role in society. It's just not perhaps so obvious.
I love that. I love being an auntie as well. And if I had children, I couldn't be doing the work that I'm doing in the world, which is supporting moms. And yeah, I just couldn't. And I wouldn't have the capacity to do what it is that I do if I had my own child. And I think that is an important role to play here on this planet and for our society. And I go back to the village, and like you said, thousands of years ago, not everyone was having children. There were women in the village that weren't having children, that were supporting life in other forms. And I really love, like you said, I love being an aunt. I love being the embodiment of an aunt. And, you know, even having capacity for a friend that lost her partner. Like if I was busy and running around, and I am busy and kind of running around, but if I had children right now, I wouldn't have the capacity to show up for her at all. And that's been really important to me right now. And I've thought about that a lot recently with my husband and I. Like, I don't think our role was necessarily to be parents. A lot of our lifestyle choices that we've made and where him and I are in our life, we don't have 9-to-5 jobs. We're not super plugged into quote unquote the system. And the last year, him and I have been able to show up for people that really need it in a different way. And that feels important.
I feel that. I resonate with that. And I think that's a role that you and I are here to do. And within work as well. Like, yeah, there's like the career and stuff, but also outside of it. So I don't really see myself as a career woman. Like, let's say I just have like a passion, and like I have a set of gifts and skills that I just are actually really fucking useful and I want to share with people. But that is in so many different areas of life. And that's so beautiful to hear that, Leisha, because there's real value in that. And also, even if you weren't doing that, your choice to not become a mom and stay at home eating ice cream and doing nothing but watching Netflix is also valid as well. So yeah, I think it's but it's also beautiful that you can be there for your friends as well. And I wonder if that's why, like, you know, I get called upon so much, is because I have the capacity, and I like to have the capacity, and it feels good, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. It feels like I'm playing a role that, you know, I'm supposed to play.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering if there's anything else you want to add or share.
No, I feel like everything's been said. I want to thank you, Leisha, for giving me this space to somewhat inarticulately express what I didn't realize really needed to be expressed. There's something that feels very freeing about just sharing all the nuance and the flip sides and the, you know, because it is a very nuanced, complicated topic. So yeah, for me, this has felt wildly expansive and healing. So I wanted to thank you for inviting me to have this conversation with you, and for also sharing what you've shared. And also my hope is that no matter who is listening, and no matter where you fall on different sides of the fence or whatever, that what we've shared in this conversation can help you feel a little bit more validated and a little bit more free. That's my intention and my hope for this taboo conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, of course. I love holding space for people to come on and share their like little edgy things. And I really appreciate you being vulnerable enough to come on and just freely talk about this, because I haven't ever heard anyone talk about it before. The first.
Oh no, I'm gonna be stoned. I'm gonna be like, there's gonna be a witch hunt. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, just your vulnerability. Thank you so much. And I do really, really think it's important to talk about the things that we can't, quote unquote, can't talk about.
Yeah.
I'm all about like, the more that we can normalize and name things, the less awkward and uncomfortable these things will be. It'll just be normalized.
Absolutely. And these are the conversations that we're having behind closed doors anyway, you know, so let's put them out in the open.
Totally.
Yeah, so I love this work. I think it's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know that you were like, I don't have to talk about myself or plug myself, but I do want to highlight that you are a very talented coach, and I would call you an embodiment and trauma informed coach. Like, I don't know what you call yourself, but will you just briefly share like what you do? And you have a podcast, you have a book, like how can people connect with you more if they want to connect with you more?
So yeah, damn it. I always get a bit awkward at this point. I'm like, oh no. Yeah, my work is very much an evolving thing, but the work that I'm doing currently in the world is really helping women to heal from patterns developmental trauma, come home to the more authentic essence, build businesses, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's quite an eclectic mix, but I work with some really cool witchy beings. And yeah, a lot of my work is based on the archetypal energy of the priestess. So I wrote a book called The Way of the Priestess, a reclamation of feminine power and divine purpose, which is available pretty much anywhere you can buy books online. I have a podcast called the Rise Priestess Podcast. So yeah, you can check those out. And if you want to check out a little bit more about the nuance of my work on Instagram, then you can go and follow me at Dr. Sarah Cox. And yeah, that's my handle. Yeah. And yeah, I would love to hear from you as well. If you listen to this episode, I'd love out of genuine curiosity, what resonated, what your perspectives are. These conversations are really affirming for me. So yeah, feel free to reach out as well, and say hi. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, I'll put all of your information in the show notes on like Instagram, book, podcast. And yes, I second what you say, Sarah, is that if anyone wants to share what resonates, what doesn't resonate, wants to share their own experience, like, I want to know.
Yeah, like, I'm curious, like, I want to have these conversations.
Yeah, so if people share things with me, I'll share it with you, and vice versa.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.